And I remember uh, uh, something I watched from Orion Terabin.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, yes, and I just did a quick search. And he basically says relationships are transactional.
Yeah.
And then there's one where he specifically says love is not transactional. So let's draw this distinction. A relationship is not transactional. Love is unconditional. Okay. Let's theoretically just say that a man can love with his
I
whole
recently, sorry, Steve,
being.
I just saw his video and he recently said that the only unconditional love comes from that. And as for the rest of the relationships, they are all conditional. I saw his short video on Instagram.
The relationship is conditional. Absolutely. The love is not conditional.
Let me see if I can find the video.
Love is not okay. I'm throwing this out there, and you can take shots at it. Love, you can love your woman with your whole heart and be willing to give your life for her and defend her and all that. Therefore,
Yep.
there's no conditions on that. Okay, but the relationship is still transactional. And a difference between love and trust, maybe it means that trust is conditional and transactional, but love isn't. What do you guys think of that?
Okay, you're talking about active trust versus passive trust. Okay. For those theology nerds, yeah. So passive trust is the passive faith, faith and trust can kind of be conflated in the Greek. So, in regeneration, God so changes the heart, and then there's a sense of passivity where you're passive in the generation, but that doesn't mean it stays passive. It becomes an active trust. And if you don't have the active trust, it's no trust at all. Assuming that you mature in this life from an infant, whatever. So trust means you have a certain faith or trust in that person. They have a reliableness for whatever, for that relationship or the terms of a contract, etc. A covenant, you could say. And if somebody breaks that trust, normally you think that it sometimes it can be repaired, sometimes it cannot be repaired. So, like Judas, he broke it in such a way that it was never repaired. I would argue he actually never had true faith to begin with, but I'm a reformed guy, so it comes with that territory. There's a sense in which you can break a trust that so ruins the relationship. Nonetheless, did not Christ love Judas as a brother? Yes, he did. So there's a sense in he has his love still covered somebody who totally ruined his trust.
So, Nick, I want to do something here. I want to steel man this a little bit because I think this concept works elsewhere. Okay, most of us have a car, and cars are very expensive, and if something bad happens to our car, we're going to get pretty angry about that, right? But every so
Probably,
often,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, but every so often we have to turn our car over to somebody else to get it fixed.
Yep.
Right? What happens if that person, say, nicks your car? Put a nice scratch down the side of the car. Are you going to take your car back to that shop?
Probably not.
Okay. So trust is something that occurs in all sorts of relationships, personal and professional. There's I could make this exact same argument about your doctor, right? You expect, like, let's say you need a surgery. You expect your doctor not to nick an artery and right and let you bleed out all over the floor, right? But you're under anesthesia. You are asleep. You can't watch him. You have to trust that he's competent to do what he is being paid to do in this case. Okay. So we can look at this and we can say there is no society without trust. But there's also no society with unconditional trust, because going back to the car example, there's other service providers out there. If one of them breaks my trust, I can, if Bob's breaks my trust, I can go to Joe's down the street, right? That's even true with doctors. If you don't, what do we say? Get a second opinion.
Mhm.
Get a second opinion is code for one of my favorite sayings, Ronald Reagan: trust but verify.
Yeah.
Well, to keep this up and build on it, compared to a relationship, when you bring your car to that mechanic to fix it, you have a huge level of trust that he will care for it and fix it and return it to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you enter a marriage contract, you have a high level of trust that the woman will perform. But similarly, when you get your car back, you kind of test to see, hey, did it get fixed? Is there anything wrong with it? Do I need to adjust my level of trust?
Mm-hmm.
In a marriage, even if you don't think it happens, the same kind of thing happens. Your wife disappoints you or screws up. Okay, you're going to adjust your level of trust. You don't necessarily adjust your level of love, because once you love somebody, I mean, theoretically, that love exists until the breach is so great that you have to, and it's a painful thing for a man to pull back his love. Would you agree, Nick?
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know how early you should do that.
Well,
It could have been 6 months ago, could have been today. And you're wondering, is today the day? Or let's put it this way. So I had my false DV. It was like the last day of I don't know, maybe the last day of November 2022, right? I found the text messages. I started adding everything up in my head. I was entertaining some red pill content, but it wasn't like red pilled until like the day after I finished. I had Rich Cooper's book came in literally the day after. This happened, and he walked out the entire scenario. I was like, damn, I wish I had this the day before. There was an episode it was like in January, I think, of 2023, where I was asking, am I going through a divorce? He said, yes, this is the frying pan on the forehead moment. You are going through a divorce. And everybody kept telling me, no, you're not going through a divorce. No, you're not. And I had it in my head that I was going through a divorce. But it took me a while to execute. And that delaying probably cost me a bit. You don't know when you need to withdraw a lot of times. It can be very confusing, especially with there's a lot of deception involved in purposely you're blocked from any communication to verify what's going on.
Well, Nick,
So you would kind of you were in the process of withdrawing your trust, which that's not so difficult. It's a huge deal. It's a lot of effort to withdraw your love.
not for women.
well,
No, but for
I
men
noticed
it is.
that women, they don't really love their husbands, because the moment he fails somewhere, she's like, okay, I'm out of the relationship. My vows mean nothing.
that's a culture. That's a cultural thing. To Nick's point, don't beat yourself up too bad. Remember, you had a lot of kids to think about.
Mm.
Right. And I'm bringing this up because I want guys to understand that Nick and I, we had two different sets of decision matrices that we had to go through. Okay. Nick had 7 kids. I had 0. So for me, the threshold was, does she love me? Do I still love her? Yes, no. And then once the answers for me is no, I can be done, I can be out. Nick has to think about 7 other people. Okay.
Yeah.
He's going to make, he's going to, and he should take more time. That's why I'm saying, Nick, don't beat yourself up too bad. Okay. Like I understand what you're saying, about, the book came and that's great that you got the book. I'm just, you had a difference. You had 7 other little people to concern
Yeah.
yourself with.
It definitely complicates. Like
Right.
without children, it's easier to do a divorce. With kids,
well, but
especially
this
little
goes to
ones.
love. Does anyone here think that Nick doesn't love his kids?
No. He loves them with all his heart. He's willing to sacrifice and do whatever it takes to be in his kids' lives
Sacrifice.
because he
Mhm.
knows it is going to dramatically affect their outcome.
Yeah.
And that's more important to him than anything else. Anything else.
Including an ex-wife, but at some point you do have to pull the ripcord, I think, because and this is something I wanted to get to. We were talking about how modulating trust levels. We have to remember that we are handing our offspring over to the woman. Men go out, they work, they come home. The women are responsible for the children for the majority of our waking hours. The reason that I wanted to bring up the point about Nick's kids is because Nick does still love his kids unconditionally. He does, right? The men never stop loving their kids. Okay? But we have to hand our kids off every day to the women to go to work. Right? We have to trust the women to some level. And when a woman does something like that, like what was done to him, can you trust that woman with your kids anymore?
No, but what does the legal system do? It's
No.
even though, okay, she did it to him. We don't care. Kids still go to the mother.
We know. We've talked about that. Not the point of this stream. You're right. But the point of this stream is love versus trust. It should make you bad.
They want men to blindly trust these feminists who screw up their kids' lives. And then
that was the pastoral counsel I received.
Mhm.
Right. So,
you need to trust your wife. I'm like, yeah, how'd that work out?
Well, it's not fair. And here's the proper way to do it. And truth will prevail.
Yeah, right.
Bullshit. Truth doesn't necessarily prevail. Yes, it's not fair. Yes, it's not moral. Those are the outcomes. And yeah, that's what happens, which goes back to the entire premise. You can love unconditionally. Could you trust unconditionally? Because the consequences don't come from loving too much. It comes from trusting too much.
And to add to your point, Steve, the truth will not prevail if they keep suppressing it. If they keep pandering to the delusions of women. How can you trust women when you know that they live in their delusions?
You don't. You don't trust women.